if you go back to the 19th century, we're not looking at a recent problem here, right? And this goes back to, I suppose, it would go back to the appearance of Islam on the world stage, right? And we haven't got time to talk about this, but when Islam appeared on the world stage, first of all it was the Arabs, right? And they got halfway through France and no doubt frightened a lot of people before they withdrew. But the greatest threat to Europe, the integrity of Europe, came from the Ottomans, right? The Ottoman advance into Europe, but it terrified the Europeans, right? You'd be in a European city somewhere in southeastern Europe, you'd hear the Janissaries coming over the hill, the Meter band with its cymbals and drums and trumpets, and it would be very, very frightening, right? So the Ottoman Empire was the most serious enemy of the Europeans. Now, how to deal with this threat? Well, first of all, the military response. Well, you're not very good at that in the first place, because the Ottoman army is the most efficient in the world at that stage. But the other thing you've got to do is to discredit your enemy. Now, this is a staple of war propaganda. All wars, you have to discredit the enemy, right? So you do this by attacking what? You attack their religion, right? You go for their religion. And this goes back, centuries in European history. So therefore, the prophet of Islam is not a genuine prophet. Islam is a religion of violence and power and sex, okay, right? And you accompany all of that with stories of what the invading Ottoman armies have done to civilians. Some might be true, no doubt a lot exaggerated, no doubt a lot completely falsified, okay? So you set your enemy up as the religion and the people, right? And who are the Turks? The Turks, savage, barbaric, right? So forth and so on. And William Gladstone was very good at this in his tract he published in the 1870s, The Bulgarian Atrocities and the Question of the East, right? And this was an open racist attack, we'd call it racist now, on the Turks. And he says something like this: this is not a question of the mild Saladins of the past, of Spain, Umayyad Spain, nightingales and fountains and learning, blah, 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 blah. This is the question of the Turks, and wherever they went, they left behind them a trail of blood. And he says they are the one great anti-human specimen of humanity, right? So the propaganda over the Armenian question in the 19th century was upheld by this kind of religious bias, right, which in England kind of led to almost public hysteria over the treatment of the Armenians, right? And so I think this carries on. So what effectively was happening was that when it came to the Armenian question in the 19th century, people often didn't try to develop a rational response to what was happening on the ground, and seeing the things maybe in local terms, local responses to, maybe a developing situation. They immediately jumped to a conclusion that, the real reason for this is Islam, or the real reason for this is the nature of the Turks. Okay? And people who would say this would have no idea about life in the Ottoman Empire, right? They have no clue, right? But they felt able to say it, and of course the newspapers and the magazines would print this stuff. So you can kind of carry this forward, I think, to the present time, that there's a lot of very deep bias, right, which attaches itself partly to this issue of what happened to the Armenians, and there's definitely a reluctance to listen to the other side.